Chelsea here from So Simple Home. Today I'm excited. We are going to sew up our swim rash guard and boy shorts. So the first thing you need are some swim materials. I have two here that have a good stretch that are going to be contrasting fabrics for this. So I've cut out my sewing pieces. I am making a size between a size 7 and a size 8 for my 9-year-old. So first thing, I'm going to do the boy shorts. So my fabric here is a directional fabric, which means that the snow or the ice cream cones are all the same direction up and down. So I just want to make sure when I'm cutting it that I don't twist it the wrong way. So I'm just going to set my pattern on here with the stretch going from side to side. And I'm going to just pin my pattern down to my fabric, and then I'm just going to cut it out. Now, when you're working with knit fabrics, it's really important, really with all fabrics, but especially with knits, that you have some really good sharp scissors, or else you're going to have issues cutting out your material well. So I'm just going to trim this out. Now this pattern is cut as a mirror image, which is pretty typical for when you're working with clothing patterns. You want the two sides to be the opposite because you have two legs. You have a right leg and a left leg. And so the pattern needs to be cut in mirror so that it can sit correctly on the body. Just going to come up here and cut along the waistline. You can see it's at an angle, and that's pretty typical for any pants, but especially when you're working with knit fabrics because they stretch and there's a lot more fabric that's needed for the back side than the front side. So there's usually a nice angle so that it'll contrast over the body well. All right, so I'm going to cut out the rest of my pattern pieces and then we're going to go ahead and get sewing. All right, we are ready to sew. You'll see I have my mirror images with the right sides of the fabric together. So this is the back side, and I'm going to stitch along the crotch seam on both sides. So I'm just using a serger. You don't have to use a serger. You could use your regular sewing machine. Just put it on a zigzag stitch using a jersey needle, or you could also use a double needle. That's what I've done for years and years. Just used a double needle, and I actually prefer that method. But a serger is really nice to have when you're working with knits. It just makes things a little bit faster and ensures some of those seams have a little bit more stretch to them. Okay, I'm just going to trim my serger threads here. And then we're just going to lay this flat. So here's my two seams. Now we're going to do the inseam. So what we're going to do is we're actually opening the pants up, and we're matching the two inseams so they're straight and matching those seams on the inside of the crotch. And then we're going to just stitch right across that inseam. So this is actually a really, really simple pattern. It looks a lot more complicated than it really is. And that's one of the things I love about it, how easy it is to sew up these shorts and this swim rash guard. All right. Here are our pants. Super easy. I'm going to take a couple of pins and I'm actually going to pin them in the back of my pants just so I know where the back is. It's pretty easy to find in this pattern, but I like to mark them. I'm going to do the same thing to the back of my rash guard. So this is the back piece of the rash guard. And then these two pieces here are the sleeve. So I'm taking one of the sleeves and matching it right sides together with one of the sides of the rash guard of the main back piece. And I'm just going to stitch along that edge. Again, like I said, this is a really, really fast pattern. Okay, I did the same thing to, or I'm going to do the same thing to my front piece. I'm matching my sleeve on the same side and stitching it in place. Okay, so did it to the back, and you can kind of see that line there. And then I'm doing the same thing to the front piece. And I do it this way just because in my brain, it's easier for me to be like, to fit them together. So I'm not looking at it like, what the heck did I just do? And you'll see that here in a second. So here's my front piece and my back piece. They look identical. But what we're going to do now is turn them right sides together. And now I'm just going to match my front shoulder seam there, or arm seam, um, to the back arm seam that's already sewn. Hopefully that makes sense there. And then I'm going to stitch that up. But again, this is something just in my brain that I do because it helps me ensure that I don't sew my pieces on incorrectly. As you sew raglan sleeves, you'll kind of get a method. So again, I'm going to match my remaining front sleeve or front bodice arm to the actual sleeve and stitch that. Raglans are one of my favorites to sew. They just really are an easy pattern to sew, and they look so cool because you can use contrasting fabrics and it doesn't make them look silly. Okay, so now I'm going to match the front and the back together just kind of like this, matching my sleeve. So I'm going to put it all together, matching the armpit seam, and then I'm going to stitch down that side from the sleeve all the way down through the armpit through the side seam of the shirt. And remember, I use pins to mark the back of my shirt, so I'll know which one is the back when I go to put my neckline in, as well as when I actually put a label in. And I usually just put like iron-on vinyl on the back of my pattern so that my kids know which one's front and which one's back. All right, doing the same thing on the other side of the pattern, stitching down the sleeve, through that armpit, and down the side seam. The nice thing about the serger is it gives you a really nice clean edge. You're not going to get as clean of an edge when you're sewing on your sewing machine, but it's all right because it's a knit fabric, so you don't actually have to have a seam finish on it. So I have plenty of these swim rash guards that I've sewn with my regular sewing machine, and they turn out great. Okay, now I'm just going to turn it right side out so you can kind of see. It does look a little funky, partially because it hasn't been ironed, partially because there's no neckline. It's not finished yet. But right now I'm going to just sew the two edges of my neckband together, the two short edges. So I'm making it a circle. So here's my little circle. I'm going to fold it in half, matching the raw edges. So it kind of looks like that. Okay, and now I'm going to pin it. Now I like to actually put the seam of my neckband in the back on one of the shoulder seams. It just looks a little more finished to me. Some people like to put it right in the center back, and that helps them know which is the front and the back. But on commercial clothing, if you go to the store, if you buy a raglan shirt, they actually usually put the seam, match the seam of the neckband to the seam of the back shoulder. So that's kind of why I do it. And then I'm just folding that neckband in half and matching it to the opposite front shoulder seam. And then I'm just going to kind of stretch that neckband and match it up along the shirt, the raw edge of the top of the shirt, just so that I ensure I have enough stretch for my neckband that it'll go around the entire neckband, if that makes sense. It's just a way to ensure. I've done it before where I've cut my neckband and I haven't given it enough stretch when I start sewing so that when I get to the back of my shirt, I don't have enough neckband and it's just kind of a mess. So I've learned. Okay, now I am just going to put this neckband and shirt right onto my serger or onto your sewing machine, whichever one works for you. And I am just going to line it up, take out my pins. You don't want to sew over your pins. And then I'm just going to stitch it, stitching those two layers, the two layers together. So the neckband right to the top edge of the raglan top. You can just see how it goes all the way around. And I am stretching the neckband slightly as I sew, and that's going to be the case whether you serge it or whether you use it on your sewing machine. The neckband is just slightly smaller than the neck edge of the shirt, and that's what you want. You don't want to stretch it too much or you'll get puckers on your shirt, but it does need to be stretched a little bit just to ensure that it goes all the way around your shirt. Okay, so that is an important part. And the more stretch your material has, the easier that is. If you're using a knit fabric that isn't super stretchy, your neckline is not going to sit as well. So it's just something you'll learn with experience and over time. All right, just going to pull this neckline off here, and then we'll show you how things look here. So there we go. Good looking neckline. Okay, I switched over to my regular sewing machine, and that's what I'm going to use actually to hem my sleeves. So I've got my sleeves hemmed, and I've hemmed the bottom of the shirt as well, and I'm just going to press them. Now, I just folded them up about a 1/2 inch and hemmed them around using a zigzag stitch. Could do the same thing with a double needle, but I couldn't find my double needle. I think I let somebody borrow one, and I don't have another one. So um, but I'm just going to press this hem on both the sleeves and on the bottom of my raglan top. Just pressing it to get the stitching to heat set a little bit and to get out some of the creases and make everything lay flat. You don't want to use a super high heat on most knits because most of them have some sort of synthetic material like a polyester or something in them. So a high heat could either melt your fabric or cause it to have some um, heat press some of the wrinkles in, which is you don't want. Now, if you want, you can top stitch your neckline down so that it doesn't pop up using a double needle or a zigzag stitch. You could actually leave it if you want. It's totally a choice that you can make for yourself as to the look you want. I have seen both done in home sewing and in commercial products. They don't always do a top stitch around the neckline, but again, that's totally up to you. That's your preference. And it might have to do with the wearer as well. You might have a child that any more stitching just adds more itching or you know, or you might want it because they like to stretch it and that would help prevent some of the stretching. So it's kind of your choice, but again, I just use my machine to hem both my arms and the bottom of my shirt. All right, now we're going to hem up and finish up these boy shorts, which personally I actually is my favorite thing for sewing now. My daughter loves having these boy shorts. So I'm again just folding it up about a 1/2 inch or so. And this could change based on the wearer if they need them a little longer, a little shorter. And then I'm just doing a simple zigzag stitch all the way around. Again, you could use a double needle to do that. If you wanted to, you could just, hem them using your serger, and that would be fine as well. But I kind of like to give it that little bit of professional look at the end. So I just folded up. But again, I was saying my daughter loves these shorts. Modesty is just a big thing with little ones anymore. I feel like, especially if you're going out into public pools and things, So I just love these shorts. Keeps her a little bit more modest, makes her a little bit more comfortable, and they're stinking cute. So, and these work for boys as well. If you have a little boy and you want to make some little kind of Speedo shorts, if you will. So just hemming up this other leg here. It's pretty simple. You do want to make sure if you are sewing these on your sewing machine that you do use that zigzag stitch of some sort because these are stretch material and they're going to stretch as they go on and stretch as they play. And so if you're not using a zigzag stitch, then you're not going to get the stretch that you need. Okay, now I'm going to hem the top, and I'm actually using just about an inch, maybe just slightly over an inch for my waistband at the top. And I started in the back, and I'm going all the way back around to the back, but I'm going to leave about a 1 inch opening on the back. All right, once we have our waistbands sewn, we're just going to measure our elastic. And there is a chart on the pattern that tells you how much you need. I think for this size, I need like 20 inches. So I just cut my elastic, and I'm going to use a safety pin. If you had a bodkin, you can use a bodkin. But I'm just going to use a safety pin to weave the elastic into my waistband here. So I'm just going to attach the safety pin to the end of the elastic and slowly feed it through the material. When you're making a waistband, you want the waistband to be at least a quarter of an inch larger than the elastic that you're using. So for this particular pattern, my elastic is about 3/4 of an inch, and so my waistband is just about an inch, maybe slightly over that inch. And I'm just weaving it all the way through. Now, once I get it all woven through, I'm actually going to try these on my daughter and make sure that they fit before I stitch the elastic closed. Um, that's something I almost always do when I'm making a pair of pants or shorts or something using an elastic waistband, just to ensure that they fit, that the elastic isn't too tight or too loose. And especially when I'm working with swimwear, I want to make sure that elastic is the right. Um, I don't want her swim trunks to fall off while she's going down the slide, right? So that's an important thing. The other thing I was going to say about elastic, if you choose to use a smaller elastic, you totally could do that if you wanted to use a 1/2 inch elastic, because sometimes swimsuit elastic is kind of hard to find in all the sizes. You most definitely could do that. Just change the size of your waistband slightly. Okay, I've tried them on her, and now I'm going to overlap the elastic about 1.5 to 2 inches, and I'm just going to put it through my sewing machine and stitch those two overlap sections together. And I just do a zigzag stitch and go back and forth. There's lots of different ways you can do it. You know, honestly, it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to see it. So, okay, now I'm going to stitch the opening that I have in the back of these boy shorts closed by just stitching across and closing that opening. So I just tucked that elastic inside that waistband and just close up the hole. It's as simple as that, really. And then I'm trimming up my threads here, and I've got my cute little boy shorts all done. So this pattern, you can grab the link in the description to get your copy of it. But it's a little raglan top and shorts, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial.